Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Today's From the Vault clip is with Steve Cropper. We shot this video back in September of 2008, about a month before we inducted Booker T and the MGs into Musicians Hall of Fame. Now, those of you who watch our channel often know that we did another interview with Steve in 2019 on our Backstage program. This interview lasted about an hour, so we're breaking it into part 1 and part 2. There's information on this interview that was not included when we did the 2019 interview with Steve, so we hope you really enjoy it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so, as always, you don't miss any of our new content. Hope you enjoy it. Steve Cropper.
Born in Missouri, raised in Memphis, Tennessee, one of the greatest cities on the planet. And if anybody's a music buff, they know how much music came out of Memphis, Tennessee. And I had to be, I was fortunate enough to be part of that whole generation of music and really the induction of sort of R&B to the rest of the world. And I don't think any of us knew what we were doing when we were doing it. We were just having fun doing it. It was not work to us then. It was just fun. Something that we wanted to do and something we wanted to spend our lives doing, I guess, you know. I always felt like I would have something to fall back on. I could always be a farmer because I kind of grew up on a farm. I knew that kind of work. And I did go to school and had a little college, so if music didn't make it, I wasn't going to be one of these die-hard musicians playing on a street corner, you know. I was going to have a day job. But as time had it, and Estelle Axton, who was the partner owner with Jim Stewart of the studio and the record shop, fortunately, because I was a friend of her son's who was in my band, gave me a job at the record shop. And my career sort of went from there. I got a good education listening to music and what was selling out there. And I also got to be close to a studio so I could do odd jobs around there. And one day Jim put me to work. Miss Axton said, he's spending more time in the studio than he is in the record shop. You're going to have to put him on salary. So that's what happened, and the rest is history.
Did you take formal lessons?
Not really. I kind of cheated the system. Our other guitar player, Charlie Freeman, he and I were the first two guys to really get together and play together. And we auditioned for a disc jockey one day that thought we were good enough to be a band, and he said, is this just the two of you? And we said, yeah. And he said, well, if you get a bass player and a drummer, he said, I'll put you on one of my sock hops. So we went around school and found this kid in the 9th grade that played drums and been playing drums for about 3 months or so. And we couldn't find a bass player. But anyway, he put us on a show, and we performed and had fun. And a little bit later, Donald Duck Dunn came around with a bass. And so he started showing up for rehearsals on Saturday, and before you knew it, we had a 4-piece band. And that's how we got started.
The drummer,
but when you asked me about guitar lessons, Charlie Freeman was taking lessons from a very, very good musician named Lynn Vernon. He was a great jazz guitar player. He knew a little rock and roll too, but he's a real good jazz guitar player. And so I would leave school, go home, get my guitar, walk over to Charlie Freeman's house, and I'd be sitting on his front porch when he came back from his guitar lesson. And he'd teach me what he learned that day, and then I'd play behind him while he got to practice what he learned. And I kind of learned that way. And then later, through some odd jobs, I was able to afford a few guitar lessons, and I actually took about a month or so from Lynn Vernon. And he finally realized that I was going to be useless as a reader. He tricked me one day and he said, okay, play this. And he played it, and I did. And he said, that's what I thought. That's not what's on the paper. You just played what I did. And he said, you know, reading music's going nowhere with you. He said, why don't you get a couple of 3 records that you really want to learn how to play? And he said, bring them over and I'll chart them out and I'll teach them to you. So he did.
First guitar?
Actually, my first guitar was a Gibson, it was a Silvertone flat top from Sears and Roebuck. And I don't think they say Roebuck anymore, they just say Sears. But I wanted a guitar really bad, and I asked my dad, and he said, I can't afford a guitar. So I literally mowed yards, and I set bowling pins, and I shined shoes, and I did every odd job that I could get 50 cents for or a quarter, and I saved about $17, whatever it was in the catalog. To order that guitar. And my dad, bless his heart, said, well, son, he said, you look pretty serious. He said, you learn how to play that and I'll buy you a good one. And he kept his promise. He never discouraged me any more about it. And when I got a little better at it, he bought me an electric guitar, which was a I believe it's like a 175 Gibson cutaway, real dot neck, great guitar. Wish I still had it. Sunburst, and that was really a good one. And we went on from there. I think I traded that in on a Birdland, and then the next thing I know, I traded it in on an Esquire, and then finally wound up getting a Telecaster. So I had an Esquire and a Telecaster, and then you start adding to.
And everybody said, well, my guitar, my drums, that was my tool. I didn't think about it making history or being something like that. It's just what I wanted.
Are you kidding me? It's unbelievable. And what I'm able to do now is take some of this memorabilia and raise money for kids, even if it's new and you sign it, and which is amazing. And without being braggadocious at all, a friend of mine who I know who does pricing the Blue Book for vintage guitars knows a guy that was willing to offer me $700,000 for the Green Onions guitar. Now, how much money could that raise? Could raise $700,000? How would I have known? But I didn't really pursue it at the time. I thought that guitar went down in a plane crash because I lent it to Jimmy King, the Bar-Kays guitar player. What I didn't know was that he picked his guitar up, had been in the shop, and dropped my guitar. Didn't have time to come by the studio, so he dropped it off at his mom's house. And the story that I got, I didn't find out about that. Somebody told me many months later, said, I think I saw your guitar, that purple Telecaster, it was an Esquire, hanging on Jimmy King's mom's wall. And I said, well, do me a favor, tell her that that's my guitar. I'd like to have it back. I was like shocked that it was still around. And come to find out, that was about the only thing other than a pair of jeans or something that she had as memorabilia for Jimmy. And I just said, hey, leave it on the wall, And if I'd have known then what it'd be worth later, I'd have still tried to get it and, did some kind of compensation. But she's gone, passed away. His dad's passed away. That we can't even find a relative. Who knows where that guitar could be? I'm probably the only one that would even recognize it. It's interesting what things get their worth later on.
Do you know what the serial numbers were?
No. Not on that one. I don't have a clue.
Jimmy Page came in my guitar shop when he was here with Plant one time, looking for a 50-something Black Beauty. He knew the serial numbers.
Yeah, I've got several of the serial numbers on my other guitars because I know where I bought them.
Yeah.
I've still got the bill of sale for them.
Now, Duck told me that they pulled his bass out of the plane, and he says, I don't want it.
Mm.
He said, at that time, I was so freaked out. I just didn't want it.
Sure.
Amplifier?
Well, that's kind of funny. The first actual amplifier I still have. And it's funny, I know that this interview is probably not dated, but I actually played that amplifier this afternoon. And we have eBay now and the web and all that, and one of these came up on eBay. And so I put some bids in on it. I said, boy, that's got to be the same one. It was called a Fender Harvard. And that amplifier is the amplifier that came with the guitar, the electric guitar my dad bought me. And he kind of tricked me. He went over to this guy's house. He had this guitar for sale. And he had it all set up, and he had it plugged into this little Fender Harvard amplifier, and I played it, said, oh, this is great. And Dad said, well, we'll get back to you on this, typical Dad stuff. We'll get back to you on this. He said, I'm not sure we can afford it. And when he said afford it, I went, oh, well, here we go again. This isn't going to happen. And it was a few weeks before Christmas. Christmas morning, there it was, laying out on the floor. So he surprised me pretty good. So I used that amplifier, the little Fender Harvard, and I was telling you about one I got on eBay. So I got my old one out, and I keep it put up, and I'll bring it out on special occasions. I use it. That's the same one that was on Green Onions. It's not on Soul Man, but it's on Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, the electric fills I did on that. And I've used it on some Rod Stewart projects, like the Atlantic Crossing album and stuff like that. And I've done a few other pretty big sessions that I felt was worthy of that kind of Otis Redding Stax sound, and it still has that sound. And the reason I got it out, I was able to get one off of eBay the other day, and I said, this is identical, and I wanted to see if it had the exact same speakers, which it does not. It might, but the markings are different, so now I want to check it out. But those little amps sound really good, and if anybody's got one, call me.
So the Esquire and the Telecaster, did that purple one, did you paint it or did you?
I did. It was kind of beat up, you know, and we got it playing really good, and it just didn't look very well. And I sanded it down, and I went to a place like, I forget the name of it, a place like Ace Hardware, and bought the spray paint that they call Candy Apple Red. And when I did it, I guess the wood and however the darkness of the ash wood, it sort of looked purple in the light instead of red. It looked more grape color than it did red, but that's what was on the can. I remember it said Candy Apple Red. So it had this little bright sheen to it. But that was a great guitar, and I played it on a lot of sessions, especially the Green Onions guitar. But, you know, I was playing it every day, and it wasn't that I wanted a new guitar. I was just about to wear out the frets on it, you know. So I kind of quit playing it, retired it, and started playing the Telecaster. And the Telecaster was a little more versatile. This was an Esquire. It only had the one pickup, so you didn't have a lot of choice except for the tone knob.
So how did you, like, what was your first session?
First recording session. Well, the good news was that Chips Moman, who's a great songwriter, a great guitar player, great engineer, great producer, wanted to engineer so bad. And at that time, Jim Stewart, who also engineered, was working at the bank. And he had booked this demo day session on a guy named Prince Conley. And he wanted to engineer it. He said, Steve, he said, you're gonna have to play guitar tomorrow. Now, he had heard me play in a club. He knew I could play. And I'd been doing some sessions, some other kind of demo stuff around town, but not anything serious. So my first real session that I was actually getting paid money for was at Stax, and I think we made a whopping $15 for this session. And it was a song called I'm Going Home on Prince Conley. And he was a pretty well-known R&B singer there in Memphis, Tennessee. And that sort of started it. And when Jim heard it and some other people heard it, they took me serious that I could probably be a session guitar player. And they started using me more and more.
Age? What was your age then?
Oh boy. I guess I'd been out of school about a year and a half. I guess I was 19.
And when did Al Jackson come in?
Well, we knew Al Jackson pretty well. We used to go to hear Willie Mitchell's band, and Al was the drummer, and we knew how good Al Jackson was. And we started looking. We had several drummers, some real good drummers, and they had various, you know, groups they played with and odd jobs and all that, and we really needed somebody regular. And we knew we wanted Al Jackson because we knew he was the best in town. And we kept asking him, and he said, no, I can't do that. He said, you know, I'm really loyal to Willie, and I've got to do this gig every night with Willie. And finally one day, and I don't think it was really about money, but I think, and Al Jackson had played in his dad's band from the time he was about 5 or 6 years old. His dad had a big swing band and so forth. I never did hear him. He had been gone for a while. But he had left Al, he had owned what we call a filling station, and a gas station, and he had left that to Al, and Al sort of ran that. He had guys that ran it for him, you know. He wasn't out wiping windows, but pumping gas, but he was there. And so he had that day thing to fall back on. And Al didn't come off stage till about 4 o'clock in the morning. So by the time he got home and wound down, it was almost daylight, 5 o'clock. So it was very difficult at first to get Al up, to get him to be over for a session at 11 o'clock. It was very, very difficult. A lot of times we had musicians sitting there waiting, and artists, for Al Jackson to show up. And I'd go over to his house, and his wife would say, Steve, I can't get him up, you're gonna have to get him up. She would like poke him with a broomstick, because Al was one of these guys that always come up fighting. It was like, what, you know, because he only been in bed about 2 or 3 hours. You know? It was real funny. But we did. We finally convinced Al to come to work with us on a full-time basis and play all the sessions, which he did. But he still did what he wasn't supposed to do, and he did what we call a little moonlighting. And so usually after Willie Mitchell, when they were doing several different artists, but mainly Al Green would be one everybody knows, he would maybe cut his show like a set short on certain nights, and they'd leave and go to the studio and cut Al Green, and Al would go over and play on those sessions. So he played on quite a few of the Al Green hits.
High Studio, was that not High Studios?
Yeah. What was it called? We were the Capitol Theater. What was? I don't even remember what High.
Was it a little dump, or was it?
No, it was a movie theater just like ours.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I could take you there, and I can't tell you the street it was on.
And
I know where it was.
Did you ever?
Or is.
American?
I did. I don't remember exactly what I played on. What was that artist I played on? I played on a couple of sessions over there. Not very much. They didn't really need me, you know. I mean, that was a little before they got the regular band where they had, you know, Tommy Cogby was playing bass and Johnny Christopher and, you know, Reggie Young and all that. They didn't need me. But some of the earlier things, you know, I didn't play a lot. I only remember maybe one session or something. So where did Stax get its name? Well, it goes all the way back to another label called Satellite, and that was the first label that they had. And before I got involved, I was around it because Packy Charles Axton, Miss Axton's son, was in our band. And the reason he got in our band, you know, he come up and he said, I hear you got a good band. He said, I want to be in your band. And I said, well, we're not looking for anybody. What do you play? And he said, I play saxophone. I said, well, we're really not looking for horns. And I said, how long you been playing? He said, I've been taking lessons for 3 months. Boy, that was real impressive. That was big. I said, oh, really? But, you know, I didn't know how good he was. So he did well with his 3 months of lessons. But anyway, somewhere in a conversation, he said his uncle had a recording studio. And that's what he said. You know, when we went and checked it out, he had some recording equipment in his garage out in North Memphis. But anyway, along with Miss Axton, they got together and bought a building out in Brunswick, Tennessee, which is a pretty good ways outside of Memphis. And he set up his recording equipment in the back room, and Miss Axton had a record shop up front. And we, as a band, the original Marquees band, used to go out there on Sundays and rehearse and try to put some stuff on tape and all that. And Jim Stewart thought we were terrible and really didn't give us much of a chance. But Miss Axton, because her son was in the band, kept pushing, and we kept listening to songs, and she'd say, no, you got to do one like this, you know, everybody's buying this, the kids are dancing to this. And she was really on top of, you know, trying to educate us to do some stuff. And it finally did happen. And when they got the opportunity, and I don't really know how that came about in terms of the real estate part of it, but on McLemore Avenue, this theater had gone out of business, and it had been sitting there for a while, and somebody got the idea and came to Jim Stewart and said, you know, this could make a really good recording studio because it's big, there's a lot of room, you could do a lot with it. And so he went to Miss Axton and he said, you know, we've got a chance here to buy some good real estate, or at least lease some real estate and so forth. He said, but we're going to have to come up with some money to get it. And I think she got interested when she said, is there room for a record shop? And she knew she wanted to be in that part of town, which was South Memphis. And so that kind of, you know, got her juices flowing, I guess. And so she made the decision to put a mortgage on her house and lend them the money to get this, to acquire it. And so they had a studio in the back, which fortunately I was actually asked because I was around. We helped take some of the seats out of that place, and I remember Packy and I with 2 hammers trying to hammer down the bolts that wouldn't come out of the concrete so they could get carpet down on it and not leave lumps in the floor. And we helped build some of the baffles and put up the curtains and all that sort of stuff. At that time, we were still Satellite Records. And if I have the story correctly, whenever we finally came up with a decent song, which later became Last Night, it was on its way to being a pretty big record, and somebody, and I don't remember if it was in like Georgia or whether it was California, I really can't remember, I should know the real story behind it, but there was a lot written about it. Somebody sent them a legal letter saying you'll have to, you know, stop using this because we already have Satellite copyrighted. And we just said, oh, you know, and I remember that it was just devastating, and they sat up all night long trying to come up with an idea for it. And I don't know whose idea it was to come up with S-T-A-X, Stewart, short, Axton, Stewart Axton. And that was Stax. Instead of S-T-A-C-K-S, as S-T-A-X, it worked out pretty good. Our lead singer in the band had gone to art school, was a very, very good artist, contemporary artist. And he drew the logo for the label and all of that. Later, he did a lot of album covers for us and stuff for the studio and so forth. So we were on our way, and that probably, the first real hit record they had was Rufus and Carla. There was a song called "'Cause I Love You." and it was a duet, and I think Carla was only about 15 or 16 years old at the time they did it. But it was a pretty good record for the label. And if I remember, that might have been distributed by Atlantic and on Atlantic Records. But that sort of got the outsiders interested in, these people may know what they're doing down there, let's check it out. And then when Last Night came around, it really did, because that record went to #3. And that was in '61. In the summer of '62, we had Green Onions, which was a #1 record, and that really got us on the planet. And a lot of interest from New York, from Atlantic Records, and they started immediately bringing artists down and wanting more product and so forth. So we cut a good record on Carla Thomas at that time called Gee Whiz. That was big. So here we were on the road, and we got Gee Whiz, which was a big record, and Last Night, which was a big record. And I guess the luck of timing, you know, people say, how did you make it in this business? Well, a lot of it is timing. It's a lot more important about the timing of something than it is the talent it took to make it. And Last Night just happened to be the perfect beat for the twist. And the twist was just about to peak. And Hank Ballard and the Midnighters had it originally, you know, and then Chubby Checker covered and it was all over Dick Clark and all that. And then I think Pat Boone did a version of it, and it was all on the pop stations and so forth. And here we come with this little instrumental in the summertime when the kids are out and they're on the beach and all that, and everybody was twisting. And in those days, you didn't communicate through the internet, you communicated on vacation. That's where you met other kids from other colleges and other schools to find out what they were doing in their town. And that's how the communication all got together. That's something that we used as a band, as producers and as a backup band, because we would go out and play these colleges in different places on the weekends. And we would go to different colleges, and we'd go to Detroit, and we'd go to Washington, or we'd come up here to UT, and see these kids doing these different dances. And Al Jackson was really a genius at watching what these kids were dancing to based on what he was playing, and he'd sort of like lean into their direction, and he could tell when they really were getting into it. And he'd come back to the studio on Monday and say, guys, we got to do something with this beat, because that's what they're doing at so-and-so, or that's what they're doing. And it worked. And so we'd start writing songs, the guys that wrote, we'd start writing songs that were designed around those beats. And it worked. It was a very good formula, and like I said, it was timing is everything.
How did they get the proper distribution to sell records?
Well, it was real simple. Distribution came strictly through Atlantic. I mean, they had their own setup. Of course, later, and what was it,
when you had Last Night, though, but y'all weren't hooked up with Atlantic in the beginning, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Really, from the
Oh
very.
yeah. With Last Night, yeah. See, they had "Cause I Love You," the Rufus and Carla record. I think I said that was on the label.
I know that you had distribution. Yeah. So
that was part of it. I mean, obviously we didn't know how to do it. We had the local distributors. As far as being able to distribute the Stax records, Jim was very smart, and we had contacts with basically one-stops, the local distributors that distributed to jukeboxes and so forth. So we sort of had that connection. We didn't have the national connection. We had some connection through radio, so we could get a few things played. How do you get it out to the marketplace to sell it? And that's where we had to go through Atlantic Records to do that.
And so the guys that were on Stax, those were neighborhood people? They were there?
Absolutely.
I mean, how much of Stax was local and how much came in later?
Well, after we had the hit Green Onions, Booker was a real top student where he was. He was head of his class. He was a trombone player and was a very good trombone player. Got the opportunity, I don't know if it was on scholarship or what, to go to Indiana State University. And if I had the story correctly, I hope I have it correctly, that he was one of the youngest trombone players to ever make that marching band. Usually you don't make the marching band till you're, a junior or something, but he did it very early. What this meant was that we lost our best piano player. And it was sort of devastating when Booker T left, because he was so talented and so good, in the studio. with all facets of it. He wrote our lead sheets. He did a lot. If we needed strings, like on a Carla session or something, he wrote the strings for us. He was incredible. And so it was a big loss for us. And we just had a meeting and said, we've got to come up with a piano player. We were borrowing from this guy, getting that guy to come in, different guys for different sessions and so forth. All of them were good, but they weren't that, they were too obligated in things they had to do that they couldn't be permanent. Somebody came to me and said, there's this kid playing in a band, and it was down on Airways, close to Park Avenue. There's a little club down there. I don't remember the name of it, but I went down there on a Friday night and went in and heard this band playing. They didn't even know who I was or why I was there. And when they took a break, I went over to the keyboard player and I said, I'm Steve Cropper, and I said, I'm from Booker T and the MGs. He said, oh, yeah. I said, Green Onions. He said, oh, I know Green Onions, yeah. And I said, well, I tell you what. I said, Booker's going to college, and we've got to have a piano player. And I said, you might be able to fit the bill. I said, I like the way you play. I like your style. He sang a little bit, too, and all that. And I said, would you come over Monday morning and talk with Jim Stewart and I about, coming to work for us? And he said, yeah. So he did. He came over, and pretty much Jim just took my word for it that he was good, and he made him an offer. And so he played on the next sessions, and everybody just fell in love with Isaac Hayes. I mean, he was great. And so the fortunate part about all of that was when Booker T came back for, after college during the summer and all that, we'd had two keyboard players. So we'd put one of them on organ, one of them on piano, and we, in those days, everything was pretty much cut mono and live. We couldn't overdub unless we took it somewhere to do that. And so usually most of those records either had an organ on it or it had a piano. It didn't have both. And so with Isaac and Booker T, we were able to have both. And it really just kind of opened up the sound for Stax. It was really useful.